Okay, so picture this, a massive 108-meter-long research platform. It kind of looks like a giant baseball bat, right? And its main purpose is to, well, to sink itself, intentionally, right in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, you heard that right. We're diving into the absolutely wild world of the RP Flip, which stands for Floating Instrument Platform. And trust me, this thing is not your average ship. It's a piece of engineering so out there it literally turned naval architecture on its side.
So that leads to the obvious question, the one you're probably thinking right now. Why? Why on earth would you build a ship that's designed to sink itself? It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But there's a brilliant reason, and it all comes down to solving a huge, fundamental problem for anyone trying to study the ocean. All right, to get it, we've got to go back in time a bit. We're talking the late 1950s. The U.S. Navy is working on this new missile program called SUBROC, and they hit a snag. They desperately needed to figure out how sound travels through the deep ocean. The problem? The ocean itself. It's just chaos out there. It's always moving, always churning, and that created a massive, massive stability problem.
And this really gets to the heart of the issue. Think about a regular ship. It's constantly being tossed around by the waves, right? Rocking, rolling, and on top of that, its own engines are making a ton of noise. It's just a mess. You can't get any kind of sensitive, accurate data in that environment. It's impossible. What the scientists over at Scripps Institution of Oceanography needed was the complete opposite. They needed something that was totally stable, like rock steady. It had to be whisper quiet, and absolutely precise.
So the eureka moment came from a few scientists, Fred Spice, Fred Fisher, and Philip Rudnick. And it was based on this incredibly simple but brilliant observation. They figured out that if you take a really long, thin object, think of a spar buoy, and you stick most of it deep underwater, it becomes incredibly stable. It just doesn't get pushed around by the waves up on the surface. And that was it. That was the spark. The big question became, what if we could build a giant one of those? One that people could actually live and work on.
Okay, so the concept was solid, but how do you actually build a 355-foot platform that can do this crazy maneuver safely out in the middle of the ocean? Well, that's where the engineering gets really, really cool. Let's break down how they pulled this thing off.
First thing you need to know, and this is wild, Flip has no engines. None. It can't move on its own. It's basically a giant barge that has to be towed everywhere. And no, that wasn't to save money. It was totally intentional. They wanted to get rid of all that engine noise. But the real secret sauce, the magic, is hidden in its design. It's all about these 6 massive tanks, called ballast tanks, that are built into that long, skinny part, the handle of the baseball bat, if you will.
All right, so this is how the flip actually goes down. It's like a perfectly timed dance with physics. The crew opens up some valves, and whoosh, 700 tons of seawater start flooding into those tanks at one end. As that end gets heavier and starts to sink, they pump compressed air into tanks at the other end to keep everything under control. The whole thing takes, maybe 20 to 30 minutes. But the real show, the really crazy part, happens right at the end.
Because that last 70 degrees of the flip, it happens in just 90 seconds. 90! I mean, can you even imagine being on board for that? You're standing on the deck, and all of a sudden the ocean is rushing up to meet you. What used to be a wall is now the floor. Your whole world just tilts 90 degrees in under 2 minutes. It's just an absolutely dramatic, unforgettable experience.
And then, it's done. Once it's vertical, Flip is this masterpiece of stability. You've got almost 90 meters of it sitting deep underwater, where the surface waves can't touch it. So what's left sticking out of the water is this 5-story research station, just floating there, almost perfectly still. It's kind of eerie, even when the seas are rough all around it.
But, figuring out how to flip the thing was only half the problem. Now you've got to ask, how do people actually live in a place where the floor suddenly becomes a wall? And this is where things get really clever.
Life on Flip meant everything had to be designed for 2 different realities. I'm talking toilets and sinks that were either duplicated or could pivot 90 degrees. Beds and tables were on gimbals, so they always stayed flat. Rooms had 2 different doors, one you used when it was horizontal and another you used when it was vertical. Even the lights were on the ceiling, which then became a wall. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie, a total rethink of how you design a room.
And it was such a unique thing to go through that they even had a little tradition for it. Every single crew member who experienced the flip got a special certificate. It was kind of like a badge of honor, Proof that you had been officially flipped.
It's a small detail, but it tells you a lot about what it was like to work on this amazing vessel.
So all this mind-bending engineering, all this clever design, it was all for one reason: science. The stability that FLIP offered was it was unmatched. It opened the door to all sorts of research that nobody could even dream of doing before.
Yeah, it was originally built to study how sound travels underwater for the Navy, and it was a huge success at that. But its legacy is so much bigger. Scientists used it to measure these tiny, subtle waves that happen deep inside the ocean. They studied temperature layers, and crucially, they could gather super precise data on how the ocean and the atmosphere interact. And that data, from a single, stable spot over a long time, that's the absolute gold standard for making our weather and climate models better. It lets us see exactly how the ocean is basically the engine for our atmosphere.
And what a career it had. FLIP was launched way back in 1962, and it worked for over 60 years. Did more than 300 missions, flipped over 390 times. It was finally retired in 2023. But guess what? The story doesn't end there. An engineering company called Deep has actually bought it, and they're planning to fix it up and give it a whole new life. So its legacy is going to continue for a new generation.
So when you look back on it, that's really the lesson of FLIP, isn't it? It's just this incredible example of what can happen when people dare to solve a problem with an idea that, well, that sounds completely nuts at first. It's a great reminder that every now and then, to find the most stable solution, you literally have to be willing to flip your entire perspective.